That's crazy that it's been 30 years. But yes, I think it is actually criminal that
Mm-hmm.
you can't get Yo-Yo's joints on streaming. Much like the same conversation we were having around De La Soul last year.
Yeah.
Yo-Yo's joints need to be available because Yo-Yo, for the most part, was part of like, this is arguable. Sir Daniel, you
Mm-hmm.
can correct me as the female MC historian. But she was part of like what I would consider like the big four in terms of like women MCs. So you have Salt and Pepper, you
Mm-hmm.
have MC Light, you have Queen Latifah, and you have Yo Yo.
Mm.
As kind of like your women who you look to. And there's this interesting quote. And I'm going to put the link to this article in the chat for folks, but from the LA Times, and it opens with no other West Coast female rapper rivals Yo Yo. And it was true. So make way for the mother load, just staying there for a second. I remember when so it was Pump It Up when I first I'm
Mm-hmm.
short stomp into the 90s, which I thought was so new. It felt new and fresh. I don't know what it was. It was her delivery, it was the energy, it was like all of it, where it was she just rode the beat in a way that I thought was refreshing. And I remember just being like really enthralled with her from that song. And then by the
Mm-hmm.
time I got to the album, was just like, oh my God, yes. And so I remembered. So we're gonna talk about Black Pearl because it's 30th
Mm-hmm.
anniversary. So here's
Yeah.
my big revelation, Sir Daniel, and then we could talk about wherever we want to go from here. My big
Okay.
revelation is that record really holds up, and it's actually really criminal that you can't stream it. Unfortunately I had CDs, so I transferred most of my CDs to digital. So
Mm-hmm.
I have Black Pearl, and I hadn't played it though in probably 20 years,
Yeah.
easy, maybe more. And those songs today, in an age where we are talking about women, women's bodies, women's agency, women's need to be able to speak for themselves, Black Pearl was having that conversation in 1992.
Absolutely. You're right. So I've had. It's funny that you brought up your big four, right? Conversation. It reminded me of the a few months ago. Fat Joe was quoted in an article listing his top five, and which of course led me to hop on, you know, the Twitters and the Instagrams with my top five of top five female MCs ever. And Yo Yo, of course, is on that list, and I will repeat absolutely why. Yo Yo is in my top five because she squarely represents the West Coast. Like there's no confusion about the fact that she's holding down Inglewood, Compton, and the whole neighborhood. There's no question that she's holding down her neighborhood. If you have never seen her live, you are missing out because you cannot take your eyes off of Yo Yo. You will not be able to take your eyes off of her because you can the energy, as you referred to earlier, the energy exudes from her. She plays on the whole stage is her playground. There's not an inch of the stage that she's not running around, and and it's just feeling the moment and vibrant and dancing and but spitting at the same time. So she's definitely on my top five for that. And let's just get down to the nitty gritty as far as holding her own on the mic. She was introduced to us um, on Ice Cube's "This Is a Man's World,"
Yep.
and I can tell you that her verse, her appearance on that record had everybody buzzing. They were just talking every single line. If a bitch is a bitch, you know that her lines just ruminated through everything. Everybody was like, "Who is that? Who is that?" And to your point, when the Stomp to the '90s record came through, the video, like you said, it was very clear what she was about. I think for her to be 19, 18, 19 at the time, which is super young, you know, you want to be, you think you're just all about having fun, but it took a lot of focus to present that kind of artwork at that age. And fast forwarding to Black Pearl, I think from the very beginning, when I popped that cassette in, and the intro used the music from Silence of the Lambs, the part where Agent Sterling is getting closer to Buffalo Bill and bringing him home. I remember the hair standing on the back of my neck because I was like, "Yo, this is cinematic. What are we about? What are we in for? What are we about to hear?" And you know, she brought it, and it's so funny to me. And J. Ray, you tell me how you feel about this. A year later, she criticized the record herself because she felt it was too soft. But to this day, I think you and I agree that that record holds up. The production, the delivery. All I'm gonna say is forget Wonder Woman. She's a trick. Running around in red, white, and blue. You know that. Who says that? Forget Wonder Woman. She's a trick.
Uh, you are right on it. Like, yes, by the time we got to the you better ask somebody record,
Yeah.
that was that interesting moment when women, okay, so Black Pearl emerged at the time when your women MCs they all got their hair pressed, they started beating that face a little bit, they was going to dance in the video a little bit, have some
Mm-hmm.
singing on the record. It it was a time when all the women were doing like a version of what Yo-Yo was doing. Now, interestingly enough, in revisiting Black Pearl, and we'll talk about this in a second, I feel like it's harder than a lot of what the other women were doing, like harder than Lights, Act Like You Know, harder than
Definitely.
Queen Latifah's Nature of a Sister. Like, I felt like Black Pearl was still hard, right?
Yeah.
When you go back and you reflect on it. But I think it was kind of, and somebody said this, somebody wrote this in a review online to say it's interesting how she was vulnerable enough to criticize her own record on the next record, but the reviewer feels the way that we feel, and like, but Black Pearl is really good. Like,
It's
you
really
know,
good.
and so yeah, I could see why at the time, because it didn't sell the way that they expected it to sell after Make Way for the Motherlode happened. Then you get Black Pearl, and like the audience didn't know. Well, one, okay, couple of things. One, it's basically like it's a women's empowerment album that if men listen to it, we would learn a lot. But dudes
They
didn't
weren't
want to
checking.
hear, they weren't checking for that album because
Yeah.
she was talking to black women. So patriarchy helped to kill Black Pearl. So, and I can see how that next time she's like, oh my God, I got to go hard again because I tried to do this other thing and it didn't work out. But the reality is, this is the record that we need. Like 30 years
Today.
later, we need this record.
Absolutely. And I think, that's why I opened up the very last episode I did of Sugar Honey on the Rocks. I opened up the show with Black Pearl because with the repeal of Roe versus Wade, all of that stuff that was happening, um, down to the gun violence, you know, revisiting um, the LA riots 30 years later, all of that stuff was happening, just seemed to be happening all at the same time. And that record, along with all the records that I played, spoke to these very moments that are still vibrating throughout the decades. And so, with respect to Black Pearl and her speaking to women, it was very necessary. And I think she also felt like, and I think I'm not mistaken, it was on one of the latest, um, you know, like a V8, one of the, I think it was Unsung. And Black Pearl was the first, her second album, but she didn't do it. Cube wasn't in the studio with her.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, Cube's cosign was important, but I thought it was very brave of her to just go in there and do it for Delph and put out a solid album. Now, granted, she had Cube, she followed up with Cube on the next album and
Mm-hmm.
had some really dope cameos. But I think Black Pearl, she did what she needed to do, and I hope if she's watching, she understands that Black Pearls deserves its flowers as a solid body of work, just a really good standing album. The production, like I said, so crisp.
Yeah.
Everything on there, the Woman to Woman record, which I think is my favorite record on the
Mm-hmm.
album,
Yeah.
it samples Strawberry Letter 23. It's just, it's her talking greasy,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, not being disgusting about it, but it's a dope album. It's a really dope album.
Um, I want to read this quote, and then I actually have a question because I want to talk about the time period. One that preceded this, that was kind of happening in this moment with women, and also kind of where women MCs kind of went. But this is a quote from Spin Magazine, and we'll also put this in the description for folks to take a look at. But a journalist by the name of Joan Morgan wrote a piece. It was called Mother of Pearl.
Mm.
And I'm actually going to read 2 paragraphs. I didn't think I was going to, but I think it offers some interesting context. 1 year later, her outrage continues to provide a voice for those who lack a means of expression, especially when life explodes in their faces and outside their doors. Witness, for example, the afternoon a Harlem apartment dweller heard sex sounds in his hallway. Not the feel-good sex sounds, but the yucky something's wrong sex sounds. In the corridor, 3 of the block's youngest Daddy Macs were doing a brown child no more than 15 doggy style. One of the rarely mourned victims, brown girls like her find their champion in Yo-Yo. One woman able to restore the self-esteem robbed of young sisters by sexism, racism, drug addiction, age, and teenage pregnancy.
Wow.
So that is how this record exists in our musical moment, one in 1992 and in 2022, because music, it exists in its time, but this record I think transcends it, and still I think people need to hear it today for that reason. You can watch the full episode of Q Points on YouTube, on Facebook, or on our website. Pick your favorite location. Peace.